Hi, and welcome to another edition of Jules Voto's Photo Focus. In this video, I'm going to be taking you on a tour of the Minolta SRT 101, showing you all its features, controls, and how it all works. The SRT 101 was introduced in 1966. It's a full-frame, 35mm single lens reflex camera with through the lens metering. So let's start like I always start when doing one of these camera videos, on the top right of the camera. Okay, we see our shutter speed dial, and it goes from 1/1000th of a second to 1 second, and there's a B setting for bulb for time exposures. You can see right here it's marked ASA. We just lift this ring and we can set our film speed. We now call that ISO, but it means the same thing. The ASA settings on this camera go from 6 all the way up to 6400. Now, the only other camera from this era, from the 60s, that has this greater range was the photomic finders for the Nikon F. However, I don't know, there was no 6400 speed film back in those days. 400 speed Tri-X was one of the most popular, and I never heard of anybody pushing it all the way up to 6400. So is that useful? Probably not. You also notice that a 60th of a second is marked in red. That is the highest sync speed with electronic flash. Okay, you want to make sure you stay at a 60th or below if shooting with electronic flash. You will also notice a film plane indication here. That is used when manually calculating the loss of light when using extension tubes or bellows. But since this camera has through the lens metering, you don't really need to concern yourself with that. We have our film advance lever. Okay, it winds the film, cocks the shutter, and advances the frame counter. It has a 20 degrees standoff position and then another 150 degrees to advance film. Could also advance the film in several smaller strokes. The center of the shutter release is threaded for a standard cable release. And here we have our frame counter, which will reset to 0 when you open the back of the camera. Okay, so on the front of the camera, on the right side, we have our self-timer lever. You could set it for between 6 and about 9 seconds. Just press that little button. It will count down and release the shutter. You could use that if you have the camera on a tripod, using slower shutter speeds, and you don't have a cable release, or of course if you want to get in the shot. All right, we also have on the front a mirror lockup. We just turn this little dial down and the mirror locks up now. All right, you could see that there with the lens off. I'll show you how to mount lenses and all about lenses in a few minutes. Okay, we also, so let's put that mirror back. And by the way, the mirror will stay down, okay, until you turn this little dial back up and the mirror drops down. One other control on the front, it's our depth of field preview button. Okay, and we just press it in. Shutter must be cocked. This is the only camera I know of, I'm not saying there's not others, where you must have the shutter cocked in order to use the depth of field preview. Okay, so you press it in, and you see the lens stop down, press it again to release. Now, once you press it in and release, so now it's stopped down, and so you can observe depth of field on the screen. Once you press the shutter release and take the picture, it opens back up. Okay, let's go to the other side of the camera, very simple. We have 2 PC outlets for flash. The one marked X on the bottom is for electronic flash. The one on top is for bulbs. It's very important If you're shooting, let's say with studio flash, where you need to plug it into the X socket. If you plug it into the FP socket, you will have no images on your film. Okay, let's, one other thing around front here, it's our lens release lock. This is a bayonet mount. Just kind of push it down and then turn the lens to the right to remove. To mount a lens, there's a red dot on the lens, red dot on the prism. Just match the red dots and turn to the right, and the lens locks in place. Okay, the Rocore lenses for Minolta have half click stops. All right, this is the 58mm 1.4. All metal construction, really nice lenses. You can also use the older lenses for the Minoltas, but they require stop-down metering. This camera, unlike the Pentax Spotmatic and the Canon FT of the same era, they required stop-down metering. The Minolta, like the Nicormat from Nikon, worked with full aperture metering. All right, let's come to the top of the camera. In the center here, we have a cold shoe. It's permanently mounted. So on the left side here, we have our rewind knob and crank. Okay, when you rewind film, you're going to turn it in the direction of the arrow. Okay, clockwise. To open the camera back, we just pull up on the rewind knob. The back flips open. And I'm going to talk about loading in a minute. Now, you also notice a dial back here. It's kind of repetitious because you set your ASA or ISO on the shutter speed dial, right, by lifting up that ring. This just is kind of like a reminder, but it also has it marked in ASA and DIN. DIN was the German system. In the United States and a lot of the rest of the world, we used ASA. Now we use ISO. But back in the day, back in the 60s when this camera was introduced, in Germany they used DIN. I'm not sure if any other companies use that, but the numbers are a little different. So this just shows, for example here, 400 ASA is equivalent of 27 DIN. Okay, on the bottom of the camera, let's turn it around this way. Okay, on the left we have our rewind button. You press that into rewind film, and again I'll show you how that works in a minute. All right, so here we have our battery compartment. You just put some pressure with your thumb and just turn it counterclockwise. And the battery this camera took was a 1.35 volt, either PX625 or PX13. Those batteries are no longer made. You can get replacement batteries. Wine aerosols have the correct voltage, but they don't last very long at all. Right here we have our standard tripod socket, and over here we have a switch to turn the meter. Right now it's set for off. We could set it to battery check, or we could turn it on. Okay, now once you turn that switch on the bottom of the camera to BC for battery check, the needle should deflect to this little mark right here. Sorry the quality of this isn't very good. I am filming this out of the original instruction manual for the SRT 101, and it's very small on the page. So right here is where that needle should go to if the battery is good. So now why don't we talk a little bit about the metering system and our view through the viewfinder. Okay, you will notice on the front of the prism, and Minolta made a big thing of this, it says CLC. What that stands for is contrast light compensator. And it's supposed to be very accurate even with high contrast subjects, and it uses two CDS cells in different locations in the viewfinder. People say it's an early matrix type metering, segmented metering. And that's one thing that distinguishes most of those single lens reflex cameras with meters in the mid 60s. The Pentax had full area averaging meter. Minolta had this CLC. Canon had semi-spot metering, a partial metering, I guess it's best to call it. Reflex had a spot meter. Nikon had center-weighted metering. Mamiya had a couple cameras. They advertised it as the creative choice. You had a switch on the camera to go from full area averaging, like the Pentax Spotmatic, to spot metering. So everybody had a different type metering system. And this was supposed to be one of the best. All right, so in the viewfinder, fairly simple. On the bottom, you will see the set shutter speed. That needle and that circle, that pointer with the circle, must line up. So by either turning your shutter speed or your aperture, you center that needle in that little circle, and that will give you correct exposure. Shutter speeds must be set to their full click stop. Do not try to set shutter speeds in between. Okay, apertures, of course, can be set anywhere. All right, so now why don't we load the camera? Anytime I explain how to load a camera, the first thing, most important thing, is make sure there's no film already in it. You know, maybe you haven't used the camera for a while, you put the camera away, and you forgot there was a roll in it. So in order to make sure there's no film, just unfold your rewind crank, just turn it in the clockwise direction, and if you feel no resistance, there's no film in the camera. To open the back, we just pull up on the rewind knob, back springs open, turn the camera over, and just real quick, the camera has a cloth horizontal travel focal plane shutter. You do not want to touch that shutter, you can damage it. Okay, so we're going to pull up on the rewind knob just a little bit more so we could drop the roll of film in. And don't forget, of course, to set the proper ISO for the film you are using. And then we're going to just bring the film over and stick it in one of these slots in the take-up spool. Okay. All right, and then we're going to just advance a little bit of film. Make sure it catches. Okay, and make sure, it's very important, that the sprocket holes engage the sprocket teeth at the top and bottom. Okay, if there was some slack, we could turn the rewind knob a little bit, but we don't need to do that. We're going to close the back because you don't want a belly in the film. You want it pretty flat. Okay, so we close the back, turn it over, and we're going to unfold the rewind crank, and just keep an eye on that. All right. All right, you notice how the rewind crank is turning? Let me make another blank. Okay, when that rewind crank is turning, that means the film is properly loaded, that the film has engaged the take-up spool and is coming out of the cassette onto the take-up spool. If this rewind knob was not turning, that would indicate that the film was not properly loaded, that the leader may have pulled off the take-up spool. So if that happens, if you don't see this turning, you want to open the back and reload. All right, so let's just make a few blanks. Okay, so now we have taken some great pictures, 24 or 36 great pictures, and we need to remove the film, so we're going to press in the rewind button on the bottom, turn the camera back over, unfold our rewind crank, and turn in the direction of the arrow. Now you will feel some resistance because there's film inside. Now, I don't know if you heard that little click. That means the film pulled off the take-up spool. Now I'm going to open it at this point. Normally you would continue rewinding to get all the film back into the cassette, but I use this roll to show you guys how to load film, so I don't want to do that. Almost got it too far in there, but that's okay. All right, and now you can see the frame counter went back to 0 when we opened the back of the camera. So this is a great little camera. They were around into the 70s. Minolta introduced other models along the way, but this was a very popular camera with a great line of lenses, and you could find them easily all day on eBay or other used camera sites. Many of the meters on these older cameras with these CDS meters do not work, but there's a great line of lenses that Minolta produced, and you can find them fairly easily as well on the used market. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention on the camera, the viewing screen has a central microprism spot for focusing. And of course the screens are not interchangeable. Okay, so that's it for the Minolta SRT 101. If you have any questions on this camera, please leave your question in the comments below or email me. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I usually publish a new video every Monday morning and Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So thanks for watching, and I will talk to you soon.